Welcome back to Have Your Say one-on-one shadow boxing. We are here with Stephen Brain from the Australian Primary School Principals Association.
That's correct.
Stephen, we got problems in the school as we discovered in the first half, but we got problems in the school when we're talking about disability in the schools. It's really the parents, when they got and discovering their child is disabled and got some sort of disability, they got problems at home. But when this child get into the age of school age, what's happening in primary school? So how are these kids going into school and what's happening to them?
We've got a system at the moment, Tibor, that looks at children from 0 to about 5, and they are looked after if they have a disability. And here we're talking about a medical disability which has been diagnosed by a paediatrician. Probably 3 to 4% of all children in Australia have got some disability. They are looked at by the health department, and they do a fairly good job. Then about 5, they hook over into...
So age 5, we're talking about 0 to 5 is 0 age to 5. They've been looked after by the Department of Health.
That's in WA. In other states it's different. Might be different departments, but it's basically a community health area.
So that's a good start.
Yeah, it's a good start. And that's where they do a lot of the early intervention. They diagnose the children. You know, let's say if they're partly blind, what do they need? How do they help? They then get into a little bit more formal situation where they come into a school situation. Now, the issue here is that we have only started to mainstream, which means have the children in classes, in mainstream classes. What we've got, Tibor, is that we've got centres. So we've got education support centres, which are basically half school and half the centre. They're in a centre with the expertise. We've got schools where they're basically in a school and the only children in that school are disability children. But 90% of all the children that we've got with a disability are in mainstream.
Why is that, Steve?
Well, one of the things that has come out is that in 1992 we had Parliament, the Australian Parliament, passed, like a lot of countries around the world, the Disabilities Act, which basically said you cannot discriminate about a child of where they learn or how they learn. So a child who is in a classroom, a mainstream classroom, you could have a disability child in that particular classroom. Now, in theory, that's fine. You know, everyone's like, yeah, that's a great idea. Implementation of that...
So what is the experience since 92?
Yeah. Well, what we've got is that we've got a higgledy-piggledy, if that's a word, situation across Australia. Now, here I'm talking about far north Queensland, Tasmania, WA, and everywhere in between.
So what is that situation, which is everywhere the same?
Well, I can tell you the situation, anecdotally and in fact. Anecdotally, I sit around a table of, for the last 10 years, with representatives from government, Catholic and independent schools. Every meeting for the last 10 years, there has been discussion about we have to improve, we're not doing this too well. So that's that anecdotal thing. And in fact, there was a Federal Senate committee
hearing
in 2015 that reported in 2016, made up of politicians from either side, who basically looked at this whole area and took submissions from over 200 individual people and groups. The report
was one of the groups, is your group, which
yes,
you belong to, the
Australian Primary Principals. We put a submission in. It's not good reading. It is not good reading. We have an act.
Yes.
We have hundreds of millions of dollars that are put in.
Yes.
And we have a system that needs to be reviewed. The implementation system needs to be reviewed. It needs to be reviewed in a lot of different areas.
Because what's the main area for the review?
Well, the main area is basically looking at a child in a classroom, the flexibility and the learning that that particular child can manage. We know for a fact, Tibor, that a lot of the children can't sit for 6 hours a day. it's impossible.
A lot of the adults couldn't sit 6 hours a day.
They have trouble too. And a lot of the children are disengaged. But a child with, let's say, autism,
Yes.
sitting for 6 hours is a really tough job. And in fact, what usually happens is they have a big hissy fit. They lash out. That then affects the teachers, it affects the other students, it affects the child with a disability, it affects the whole culture around that at a school level.
And of course, at home, the parents.
At home, it is a really hard job to do. So what we're trying to do is say, okay, child with disabilities, put them into this particular pigeon box, which is a school, which is basically hasn't changed much since the 1940s or 50s, and actually put them in there and actually say, okay, teach that particular child. We need to look at other ways. The other big area is looking at the teacher expertise. When a teacher trains in Australia,
Being a teacher, yes.
Trainee teacher, they are taught about literacy, numeracy, all of those sorts of things. The thing about disabilities is not touched on much at all. I actually believe disabilities within our system is a bit of a taboo subject.
Is it?
No one talks much about it except the teachers. What are we going to do?
Yes. The parents, of course, because they're worrying.
Are worrying all the time. And in fact, in the committee findings, there was a submission from a group in the Sunshine Coast in Queensland that started off with 200 families. It's now up to 700. And they actually say, because of the conflict that wraps around all of this, on average, one family leaves the education system and is homeschooled. One family a week leaves the education system.
And doing homeschooling.
Doesn't that tell you something?
It is. Something is not working.
Something is not working. So
it's rather obvious.
What we need to actually look at is some flexibility. My aim in life would be to actually have a parent, the school, parents, the school, and maybe expertise, paediatricians and those sorts of things, those sorts of people, saying what is the best education environment for this particular child.
Because it's always individual.
Yeah, everyone, they're all different, as all the other children are as well. So what we need to do is say, what are the flexibilities? Yes, maybe mornings at the school and maybe morning at home. So part home, part school. The funding that's all wrapped around that could go with the child and actually work out, what's the best arrangement. Because the
funding is, on the funding level, we got funding already allocated for
hundreds of millions of dollars.
$100 million for disability kids, students. So your suggestion, the funding is go where it's belong to, which is a kid, not the school, not the home, wherever the kid is learning, that's where the funding should go. Is it the way as it is now? The funding is go for the person who is designed?
It's pretty common sense, isn't it? At the moment, we haven't got common sense. It basically goes to the school. Why? Because the school system, the education department, gets their bucket of money. But the health department gets their bucket of money. Not much interaction between. You actually need to look at the child. We have got a system at the moment for disabilities that looks at the education system, looks at the parents, looks at the schools, forgets about the child. We've actually got to look at the child.
Steve, we got how many years since 92, 93? How many years is that? 20-something, 25? So why this is not solved, this problem, which is an obvious problem, in the past 25 years? So what are the politicians doing about that?
It is extremely frustrating to actually sit opposite a parent who is so distraught about their child's education and where a school can't do anything about it.
And really the school not have the
we haven't got
flexibility? So that's rigid, bureaucratic.
In Queensland, they haven't got that flexibility. In Victoria, they haven't got that flexibility because we are education. We need to actually look at the child and wrap around all the resources from all the different government and non-government areas into that. We need to actually
But
look
I
at a
thought-
family and child-friendly.
But I thought the whole disability issue and the solution with this 1992-93 sort of allocation of the money and the system to be established is looked at the child, not the educational system, not the health system. It's the child that is belonged to. So something is fundamentally wrong. And it's a federal decision, or the state can make decisions?
Well, see, this is the other area that we got in Australia. Unlike Canada, which hasn't got a Canadian education system, we
Yes.
have got a Australian education, and then we've got our states who kind of do their own thing. But if you look at that report,
Yes.
that commission report, the Senate report,
Senate committee report.
all
yes.
the information's there. They had 10 recommendations which looked at things like professional learning for teachers. They looked at
Yes.
access to education. They looked at Indigenous areas, huge area of disabilities that isn't touched. And they looked at the excellence versus what a lot of schools unfortunately are doing is babysitting. It is, because they haven't got a curriculum that wraps around the individual child. But probably the most important thing, Tibor, is this whole thing about if you're going to have an act, the act looks at the culture of a school with disabilities. We are kind of in school sometimes pigeonholing a disability child with a non-disability child. What we have to do is to bring it together. It's not going to be fixed overnight. It's going to take years. It's going to take a lot of passion. It's going to take a lot of people who, at that top level, who are driving it down.
And understand.
Understanding. Basically, what we want, compassion for the individual child. We're talking about primary kids here. We're talking about 5-year-olds, 6-year-olds, 7-year-olds.
Most important age.
Most
And most important
age.
time.
Yeah.
Stephen, thank you for being with us and the opportunity to talk about disability and the school system.
Thank you very much, Steve. I appreciate it.
Don't forget, next week, same time, same channel, and your say, one-on-one shadow boxing.